Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Koldar here. Today we are looking at Heroic Jin'rokh the Breaker in Throne of Thunder. So, this guy feels appropriately difficult for the first Heroic, sort of like his normal counterpart. Not all that difficult, and there are only a few changes on Heroic. So I'll cover those changes first, and then we'll go through the fight as a whole and some tips for phases and transitions. So let's get started. So there are two major changes to the heroic version of this encounter. The first is a brand new ability called Ionization. This is cast once every statue round, and it is cast about 20 seconds after your tank is thrown into the next statue. So about 20 seconds after the puddle begins to appear. When Ionization is cast, Jin'rokh will apply the Ionization debuff to all raid members, excluding your tanks. This debuff lasts 24 seconds, and it's a magic dispellable debuff. So there you can see it was on me there. When this ability is dispelled, or when it runs out naturally, it just expires, this will deal 450,000 nature damage to that player that it was on, as well as anyone within 4 yards of them. So we'll get into some tactics for how to handle this in a little bit. But the basic idea is you have to get rid of 8 of these stacks throughout the raid within the 24-second duration period, doing so safely. The second major change to Heroic has to do with the Lightning Storm. So here you can see Storm started. In addition to the normal AE damage on the raid, there's also the addition of these new Lightning Strike Pillars. These will hit random areas around the room during the storm. Any player inside one takes 400,000 nature damage. And in addition to that, the lightning strikes will spawn 4 lightning bolts that move out in random directions. So you can kind of see it's basically a advanced game of Frogger. You have to dodge these effects and heal the damage from the storm as normal. Any lightning bolt that hits a player will do 200,000 nature damage. So not quite as dangerous as a pillar, but they can stack up quickly. And again, we'll get into the specifics of that in a little bit. Other than those two things, however, this fight is identical to the normal version in terms of mechanics and tactics and all that stuff. So let's just get into some of the strategy for handling the changes on Heroic. So first we'll talk about handling ionization. The first major thing you should know is that the primary rule is to never have ionization expire or be dispelled while you're within a puddle. Obviously, the damage that is dealt to you will spread throughout the puddle and be doubled to anyone that's in it, so you'll just wipe everyone pretty much instantly. So obviously don't want to do that. Therefore, because there's a small AE effect when ionization is dispelled, you need to position your raid members properly so that they don't hit anybody else when they're running out of the puddle to get the ionization removed. The way you do this is up to you really, but we kind of assigned players to general front, middle, or back sections of the puddle. So we would hang out on the side, and then when those players were ready to be dispelled of ionization, they would move out kind of in their respective quadrant or area and not be too close to each other. So beyond that, you need ways to dispel beyond just your healer dispels if you're using 2 healers. And you don't want it to expire on its own. So, for example, we have 2 DPS Shaman. They both use Glyph of Shamanistic Rage, which in addition to just using Shamanistic Rage to lower the damage from the effect, it also dispels a magic debuff on them. So this saves us healers 2 dispels we'd otherwise have to do. Our Shadow Priest also dispels his own, so again that saves us another one. And I'm able to use Diffuse Magic as a monk every 90 seconds, which is the cooldown of ionization, so that also saves a dispel global, or a dispel cooldown as well. So anything you have like that to dispel yourself with it, actually using a dispel cooldown will be very handy for this. In addition to that, if you have a form of immunity, you can preemptively immune yourself and never get ionization in the first place. So it's difficult to notice on my grid, but when ionization is cast every other time, our Holy Paladin is able to bubble it preemptively, and therefore the application never actually gets on him. So any class that has some form of immunity can do this as well. So you can ice block it. I think you can cloak with shadows. Hunters can deterrence. AMS from Death Knights probably works. Anything like that. If you can be immune when ionization is completing its cast, you won't get the application, and then you won't have to worry about the dispel or anything. Now that said, you have to be very careful that you don't mistime it, because obviously if it does hit you and then you immediately immune and remove it from yourself, you'll probably be in the puddle and kill everyone, so don't do that. But anything you can do to remove the application before it actually gets applied is going to be beneficial to the raid. So aside from just the ways to avoid the effect or dispel it outside of actual healer dispels, the main thing here is you have to, of course, manage the damage in some way. It's 450,000 to that player, and this will usually or almost kill anyone that's not full health. You can see my health is 449,000 in my gear. So people with slightly higher eye level will have a little bit more health from stamina, but it's really close to the health levels of everyone these days. So highly recommend that everyone uses a personal cooldown when they are getting dispelled from ionization. In addition to that, you also need to consider the time outside of the puddle. You don't want everyone to run out at the same time, because you can't dispel that many things at once. And in addition to that, you wouldn't want everyone to be dispelled simultaneously, because all that damage would hit at the same time. And then any follow-up AE hit would probably be deadly. So the way we handled it was sort of rotating players. And the tip that was suggested in our raid that works really well is basically to have the healer dictate who it is they want to come out of the puddle and get dispelled. So for example, in my group, I'm healing the first group that I'm in and dispelling them. So when the ionization is about to hit, both the hunter and I will step out, and I dispel myself instantly with diffuse, and then I manually dispel him while he cooldowns, and then we go back in the puddle, and then the Shadow Priest and the DPS Shaman that are in my group, then they go out, either at the same time or taking turns. It doesn't really matter. But that way I can call out one of their names that I'm actively healing and keep them topped off and provide a hot or whatever it is. And in group 2, the same is happening for our Holy Paladin and the group members there. So right now he's healing our Druid who just stepped out to get dispel, while I was doing the same with our Priest in the first group. So basically just communicate who should be out of the puddle, ready for dispel, and therefore using their cooldown, expecting the dispel to hit them at some moment. And then you can just rotate through players within that 24-second period pretty easily with this. So, managing the new lightning storm is by far the most difficult aspect of Heroic. There's just a lot of damage going on, and it's very difficult for everyone in the raid to successfully dodge every bolt that's going on, which means spike damage can kind of go up and down if someone gets hit here and there by one of these random bolts. So the name of the game for us was rotation of raid cooldowns wherever possible. So generally in the first storm, I would try to use my revival cooldown, which is not the greatest because it's just a bunch of instant healing. So it's good to top everyone off, but because the spike damage just hits from a couple bolts at once, sometimes it's not the best. But we use that, and then a Paladin Devotion Aura. And then the second time around, we have our Balanced Druid use Tranquility while she uses her Bark Skin cooldown, and I use my shield bubble thing on her. So she's able to just stand still and use Tranquility for a few seconds and take the hits if they come at her. And that's a really good cooldown, actually. And then we also have a devotion aura from our other paladin with that. And then third time it's back to revival and first devotion aura once again. Beyond that, of course, is just any extra cooldowns that raid members have to help survive, throw out healing whenever they can. The key, of course, is just survival. You don't have to worry about doing damage during Lightning Storm because with appropriate damage to be doing heroics, you shouldn't have a problem with the Berserk timer on this fight. Assuming you're using 2 healers. With 3, it might be a little trickier. But, yeah. So, as for dodging them, the only major tip I can offer that helped us was kind of hang out near one of the cubbies. So we tried to position the puddles throughout the fight so they would always spawn just going clockwise around the room. So the next one would be clockwise from the previous one. And then when storm starts, we just move clockwise one extra section to the next quadrant and hang out near that cubby area. This helps with heal range, first and foremost. And also it tends to be easier to dodge things since if you just think of the entire room as a valid location for the pillars to land, being the center is the most likely to have things cross over, whereas being on the side means you're less likely to get hit by something. So there is randomness to it, so it's not always going to be easier this way, but we found it was generally. And you can see here how it's just crazy stuff going on. I freaked out and had to cool down myself. But yeah, so once you get some practice on Lightning Storm, the name of the game is survival, dodging, cooldowns, and healing. And don't worry about attacking the boss or anything like that. You also should be aware that as soon as he breaks out, he's probably going to do an AE on the raid. So if anyone's just at a sliver of health, they may die, even though they dodged everything. So you have to be very careful of that. Just try to top everyone off as soon as that storm is ending. And don't be afraid to spend your mana as a healer, because this really isn't a very healing intense fight other than that section. So, yeah, that's my tips for Lightning Storm. It's kind of a bitch, though. So let's talk about Thundering Throw and Static Burst, or Static Wound. So I've slowed the video way down here and I'm zooming in so you can see the target frame that I have, which is at the top there. I'm targeting the boss. And then to the right of that will pop up his target. So right now the boss is targeting our paladin tank, Doog. And he'll switch between the paladin tank and our monk tank, Def. Now the reason that this transition is important is that when the boss throws the current tank, who will not have any stacks of the static wound debuff, that tank is then stunned and therefore ignored by the boss for the duration of the stun, about 5 seconds. This means that the boss will actually attack the previous tank for that period, and since this tank will have static wound on them, this will do AE damage to the raid. And of course this is amplified when you're in the puddle as well. So you're going to have to find a way to mitigate or deal with this in some way. There are a variety of ways to do it. The easiest, or I shouldn't say easiest, but the most simplistic is to heal through the damage. I don't recommend it because there's other stuff going on here and it can be pretty dangerous. Another way is our monk tank found that he was able to use his nimble brew for every other round of this. So basically, when he gets thrown, which he's about to get thrown here in a second, so the boss is targeting him, and now here comes the throw from the boss. And the bottom left there you can see on the grid frame, if you watch, as soon as it turns orange for Def, he'll be stunned. And then he's going to break it with his own break to get out of stun. So there he broke it, and now he taunts again immediately. So during that period, there was pretty much only one melee swing, maybe two, that were allowed to actually even try to connect with our other paladin tank, and therefore that could potentially AE the raid. So that's one thing that'll work well. When the tables are turned, and in this case, when our paladin tank gets thrown and he targets our monk tank tries to use his short cooldown that increases his dodge chance. So just sort of, the same idea here, but in reverse. He's trying to mitigate the chance that the boss will actually land a connecting blow. And by doing that, usually we only get one, maybe two swings once again that actually connect during this period before the paladin tank can actually taunt. So this is not the most important aspect of the fight, but it does matter when you're getting a lot of spike damage in this case. You want to be careful of that and try to find a way to mitigate some of that damage in some way. All right, so finally we'll talk about focus lightning a little bit. Mechanically, this is the same effect that you see in normal. So when a player gets targeted, they just need to run out of the raid immediately. And what we found that works best is to just try to get it to explode near the wall somewhere, in one of the cubbies preferably. And this will just eliminate the likelihood that a next player, when they're kiting, will have to kite over the same spot that a fissure exists and have it cross over and explode. And we didn't have much trouble with that at all, so this method seemed to work fine for us. That said, one of the very dangerous things about focus lightning on heroic, I found especially, perhaps because of just my relative position, is that when the actual orbs appear, they will do 50,000 nature damage every half second to anyone within 5 yards or so of the orb as it travels toward the player. This means that you're taking 200,000 damage per second if you are near an orb while it's traveling through a puddle. It's a crazy amount of burst damage. So it's maybe not enough to worry about your overall strategy and revolve around it, but you definitely should just try to be aware of when the orbs are spawning near you, or just when they're spawning, and just have a quick glance to see if it's going to pass through you when the player that's being chased is cutting it out. And if you can sidestep a couple feet, even if you have to lose a global, it's worth the survival for that. Because I had more than one occasion where, just due to my central left position, orbs would pass right over me and, just do 300,000 damage in a matter of a second or two. So just something to be aware of when you're in that puddle and those are spawning. So I think that really concludes it all. I think we covered everything. Most of this will be just like the normal version, just amplified up a bit. So the real focus should be on planning your ionization dispel, how you want to handle the healing and the dispel mechanics, as well as the order of players that should get dispelled. And then figure out your positioning for Storm to avoid the pillars and the bolts, and practice survival and healing on Storm primarily. Once you get Storm down, the rest of the fight should fall into place fairly quickly. So that is Heroic Jin'rokh the Breaker. Good luck, and thanks for watching.